So we'll get started with AB 563, dealing with top 5 primaries, instant runoff voting for the offices of U.S. Senator and U.S. Representative in Congress. And we're joined today by our authors, Representative Tussler and Senator Smith. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning. No, I mean, I think it's all about incentives, and I think it clarifies, I believe a lot of the representatives, once they come in the building, they're not, they're trying to do their best for everybody in their district, Republican or Democrat. There's things they can do, there's things they can't do, but they're trying to help everybody. But I really think that this helps not only for us once we're in the building, but the candidates prior to entering the building, to get them in the mindset that they're not just representing a portion of their district, they're representing everybody.
Have you ever gone to the voting booth and asked yourself, why does it seem like I must vote for the lesser of two evils? Right now, the political parties are incentivized to invest money in selecting their opponents as much as spending money on convincing voters that their policies are better. Now, I'm a Republican, so I'm going to pick on the Democrats because, well, that's what Republicans do. So sorry, Rep. Snodgrass. I'm sure Democrats would do the same to me. In recent elections, the Democrat Party invested millions and millions of dollars in Republican primaries. In Pennsylvania, to select Doug Mastriano and Dr. Mehmet Oz. In Arizona, to select Kari Lake and Blake Masters. In Wisconsin, to select Dan Kelly and Tim Michels. In Alabama, to select Roy Moore, and I could go on. Democrats spending money to help Republicans win primaries. That sounds crazy. Yet, we do not have Governors Mastriano, Governor Michels, Governor Lake. We do not have Senator Oz, Senator Masters, Senator Moore, and we do not have Justice Kelly. As a Republican, I give these examples. I'm sure Democrat friends in the room might have some of their own on their side. But the fact of the matter is, what we have isn't particularly effective and isn't working all that well.
Everybody does what it takes to get and to keep their jobs, and elected officials are no different. Congress people are no different. We shouldn't expect that they would. So everything that we see in the current political system is because it's a good way to win. And the purpose of Final Five voting is to change how we hire and fire people so that we make solving problems the best way to get hired.
Mind if I take this one? I got to go back to the education discussions that happened in this building about 35 years ago. And education was failing, particularly in Milwaukee. And the leaders of the state decided to allow parents to have a choice in their children's education. And today, almost 35% of the kids in Milwaukee are educated through the parental choice program. And I just think about, we had an unacceptable status quo in our education system 35 years ago. And if we would have decided to make a constitutional amendment to changing our education system, where would we be today? And I think it's a similar analogy here. We've got an unacceptable status quo in D.C. I doubt there's anybody in this room that would take the other side of that argument that D.C. is not working as it should. And to pass a constitutional amendment on potential solutions, I think, would be unwise.
Sarah Palin didn't lose because of this election system. Sarah Palin defeated herself. Let me explain why. Mary Peltola is a Democrat. She is an Alaska Native woman, and her slogan was family, freedom, and fish. Now, those are bell ringers. Those are dog whistles for Alaskans. Those are things Alaskans care deeply about. Mary is a very gracious, very calm, very peaceful person. Let's contrast that with Sarah Palin and Nick Begich. These are two Republicans, and every debate on the stage, the two of them were fighting each other. All the literature they were putting out was against each other. Nothing about what Alaskans wanted. They defeated themselves, and Sarah Palin defeated herself. I have to tell you, Alaskans are not in love with Sarah Palin. She quit on us. Speaking to the 4 or 5 women here on this committee, Sarah Palin was our first woman governor. That's a big, hairy deal, and she quit on us.
Two of the bedrock principles of our military special operations community and the military in general are our leaders' accountability
and a leader's giving consideration to the best idea, regardless of where the idea originates. Unfortunately, I believe our current primary voting system hampers a federal representative's ability to solicit, discuss, consider a fuller range of ideas and proposals. Final five voting is a solution to the structural challenge. And to counter previous points, I do believe there's a problem, and I do believe this is a solution. So it's not a solution in search of a problem.
I eventually recognized that my views don't fit in silos. I think most voters are this way, although each person's mix is different. Few of us are ideologically pure. But primaries force each of us to vote as if we were. Many candidates are probably no different until they compete in a closed primary. Final five voting, not ranked choice, will help elected officials vote their conscience, and we voters will be able to cast our votes for someone instead of against someone.
I swore that oath when I enlisted, when I re-enlisted, and when I commissioned, and I had the privilege over my 37-year career to execute that oath numerous times for re-enlisting soldiers and commissioning officers. All of you swore a similar oath to the U.S. and Wisconsin constitutions to support those constitutions. I embraced the Army values throughout that career to ensure I was always fulfilling the oath I made, and I continue to use them as a moral compass. Unless all soldiers on a team in a unit across the Army live those values, we can never achieve the potential and peak effectiveness of our military. The same is true of our government. If elected officials are not able to live their values, we never develop and implement the best solutions to our biggest challenges. I have sought such facts and truths, including openly listening to and considering arguments for and against, and I've filtered them through my values. My conclusion is that AB 563 will free our congressional representatives to live their values, truly serve their constituents, and fulfill their oaths of office.
In my military service and in business, progress depends on teams coming together across diverse perspectives to solve problems. Success comes when we focus on our shared hopes for this country and state rather than pure ideologies. I fear the incentives in our current primary system are taking Wisconsin in the opposite direction, forcing candidates to rigid party positions, diminishing consensus views, and discouraging collaboration and compromise.
So I refuse to believe that we can't figure it out. This is America. Great things happen here because we constantly innovate. So let's make sure that that American exceptionalism extends all the way to the systems that we use to govern ourselves. The only constant is change. I thank you.
So here's where I'm coming from just a little bit. I was, and I say was in the past tense, I was a reporter, news anchor, and news director since the beginning of the baby boom generation. I've covered local and state and national elections and conventions for 50 years, and by far the vast majority of those right here in Wisconsin. It was my singular responsibility and passion, very honestly, to inform, not to advocate. That was my job. And for me, it's come down to meaning nonpartisan causes. I would like to feel free, and I feel like I am free to make my choices that are not based on any of those considerations, but I'm more free, I feel, for myself to choose what I become involved with. Democracy Found, for me, was one of those initial choices.
In so many districts, right, we mentioned this, in over 80% of our congressional races, it's not effectively competitive when you get to the general election because the districts are so solidly red or solidly blue that whoever made it out of the Republican primary in a red district or the Democratic primary in a blue district is virtually guaranteed to win. Right. So the competition actually happened in that primary. In this case, you could say instead of just deciding in that primary, all of a sudden in a solidly, right here in Madison, I live in Middleton, so I'm in Dane County, right? In Dane County, all of a sudden Republicans and independents have a voice on the general election ballot. Because right now, Mark Pocan doesn't have any real competition, right? Because it's a solidly blue district. And so all this is saying is not even that Mark shouldn't get elected, because he'd probably win under any system, right? Mark Pocan is a pretty popular congressman from this area, and he's pretty representative of his voters, but he doesn't have to be representative of independents and Republicans right now, because he's not accountable to them electorally in the same way that he's accountable to primary voters on the Democratic side, because that's his threshold to win.
I once read that countries don't fail overnight. The seeds of their destruction are sown deep within the political institutions. And I believe that you, the legislative branch, are the first branch of government institutions. But when your branch is dysfunctional, like it has been in Washington for decades, not just the last couple of years, but decades, and can't solve big problems like our national debt and the border crisis, pressure to improperly disregard the rule of law or expand executive powers through overreaching executive order increases. Even worse, because Congress is broken and unable to update laws and processes to our current needs, our judicial system may improperly and actively intervene. And when this starts to happen, and I believe it already is, the stability of our entire institution of government comes into question. I believe solving gridlock in Congress is the linchpin to relieving the pressures of more dangerous consequences of authoritarianism and activist courts.
This tool of using ranked choice voting to conduct an instant runoff in the general election takes all the advantages of that runoff by winnowing the field, by identifying who has the broadest support among the constituency, but does it instantly. And to me, that's the real value. And whether or not that's a real majority or not, however you want to classify that, I think the important thing to recognize is that every voter had their opportunity to have a say, how they feel about all the candidates. If they choose to only rank a handful of them, and by the time it's winnowed to the top two, their particular ballot doesn't provide a statement on those top two, it truly does provide a statement. It's them saying, I am indifferent between these final two candidates, and if they were in a head-to-head runoff, I wouldn't show up, because to me, they're both not acceptable. I think that that's an important way to remember this. It ultimately will show who the majority of the district supports when it's winnowed down to those two most popular candidates.
I'm a volunteer co-leader of a group called Bridge the Divide. My colleagues and I have done Final Five voting demonstrations for over 70 groups. That translates to 1,000 average citizens, and I mean average citizens. These presentations occur mostly in people's living rooms as their friends, their neighbors, their relatives are invited. The learning that I share with you is this is not too complicated. We have done these demonstrations with 6, 7, 8-year-olds at street fairs. We have done this in the Sycamore Senior Living Home in River Falls. In one house party in Menominee, I had a 93-year-old gentleman attend this party. They all get it with very little instruction. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time. We don't have to live with a broken election system. We don't have to live with that squeaky hinge, that sticky window. Pick up your toolkit and let's fix it now. Thank you so much.